morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fourth panel with the title Focus on Ukraine, Stabilization and Reconstruction Aspects. My name is Ondřej Kopečný. I work for Transparency International Czech office, but I used to work also among the development NGOs. I used to be on the board of FORCE, so I'm happy to be back, sort of, to my former colleagues and friends. Well, as the title says, the panel is, and our following debate will be focusing a lot on Ukraine. I heard that you already, there were already some comments in the previous panel, so I hope that you save all your questions and comments for now. Ukraine is the country that bravely resists, as we all know, to Putin's aggressive, senseless war. And of course, we all are very much concerned and following the situation. But I would say that, especially for the countries in the Central and Eastern Europe, the situation there is even more important also thanks to the history of these countries with the former Soviet Union and invasion in the past. I would say that maybe Czechs, we can find hardly ever situation when Czechs actually paid more attention to the situation in some foreign country, as we can see now in Ukraine. We could see really big wave of support for the people who came from Ukraine to Czech Republic and also other countries. We could see also the support in financial terms. We have one of the panelists is from People in Need, and basically in their call for support, to more than 2 billion Czech crowns were raised. We could see it also from the side of the government that I think a few weeks ago passed or agreed on 1.5 billion in next 3 years that should go to Ukraine in form of development cooperation. So this is already quite unique. So it's kind of logical and understandable that we have this panel because Ukraine will be on the top of the list, I guess, regarding development cooperation in the next years. But in this panel, we actually should focus not only on the current situation, but hopefully, mostly on hopefully soon post-war future. And concretely, our panelists should provide us with an overall perspective on Ukraine and elaborate more on the role of civil society in stabilization and reconstruction of this country. We should also get more information about the plans of the Czech government and also about the business community in the Czech Republic. And I'm very happy that we have quite a strong environmental and sustainable angle. We should get insight into Ukraine's environmental and sustainable reconstruction needs. We should also improve our understanding of how agriculture is changing regarding the financial structure and also regarding the issue of contaminated land. And of course, this all will be framed by how the international community, EU, Czech Republic, see these challenges. And now, finally, it's my great pleasure to introduce our distinguished panelist who will give us or provide us with this information. And I will introduce them in the order in which they will speak. So I will start with Pavel Havlíček, who is a research fellow of Association for International Affairs Research Center. His research focus is on Eastern Europe, especially Ukraine and Russia and the Eastern Partnership. He also deals with questions of strategic communication and disinformation, as well as civil society and democratization. Welcome. Our second speaker is Lucie Chudá. She is desk officer for Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia at the Department of Development Cooperation and Humanitarian Assistance of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Czech Republic. Lucie Chuda was previously working on development cooperation counselor at the Embassy of the Czech Republic in Cambodia and project manager for Cambodia and Mongolia at the Czech Development Agency. Welcome. Our third speaker is Marek Štis. He has been working for people in need since 1999. Currently, he coordinates people in need humanitarian work globally, supporting the early phases of the response, supervising the access, funding, and partnership strategies, and together with his team, he providing oversight for qualitative aspects of people in needs work. Marek was also setting up people in needs response in Donbass in 2014 and has closely followed up the development of a humanitarian context in Ukraine since then. So welcome, Marek. Thank you for being here. Our fourth speaker is Dagmar Kuchtová, who has been the General Director of the Confederation of Industry of the Czech Republic since 2014. She was the Chairwoman of the Executive Committee of the Business Platform for Foreign Development Cooperation, and she represents the Confederation of Industry of the Czech Republic in the Executive Committee of Business Europe in Brussels. Welcome, we are happy that you're with us. And our fifth speaker is Vladina Martinkiewicz from Bankwatch, where she works as a project leader working on the international as well as on Ukraine projects. Since 2007, she's been working in the Central Asia, Caucasus region, and Eastern neighborhood. Her qualifications include extractive industries, community support, and applying gender and women's rights lens in project assessments. Since the war in Ukraine, her main focus of work is the Ukraine green reconstruction. So thank you again, Vladina, for being with us. So these are our panelists, and maybe just a short recall how the structure of the panel will go. First, there will be inputs from each panelist, and then I will be happy if we can have a round of reaction to what have been said on the panel, and definitely then I will be happy for your questions, and we will have open floor for questions and reactions with the audience. So without further ado, I will ask Pavel to start with his first input. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Andrzej, for having me. My great pleasure to be here with you. So my task is to kick off the discussion today. I will be trying to give you the bigger picture, because obviously sometimes one might have a feeling here in the Czech Republic that everything is just about Ukraine, but obviously this is something that has been existential to us. It is, I always say that the 24th of February was sort of a 9/11 moment for us here in the Czech Republic. And you would see the implications. Czechia, and I think this was already referred to here, is per capita the highest recipient of Ukraine refugees. There's more than 400,000 people coming to the country. This is really something that is directly affecting us on an everyday basis. That is why I think we need to be dedicating enough attention to this topic, even if obviously we are discussing much more broadly, the debate about resilience and resilience as a task for not only the Czech EU presidency, but also for the terms coming after us, And so here I will be saying a few words based on this new publication that we have just presented to you and prepared for you together with colleagues in Force. And thanks for their support actually in the whole process, because we believe that this is something that we really need to be discussing thoroughly. And I'm not only discussing about the post-war reconstruction, as Andrzej already mentioned, but Ukraine as a task, because this is something that is still ahead of us, and we will have to be discussing this in a very long period ahead of us, because this is not something, and I'm here referring to the Russian war against Ukraine, this is not something that is going to end overnight, and this will really probably take decades before the country gets fully back on track. And hopefully also from my perspective, and this is why we are trying to also, this is what we are trying to say in the paper, also this is the right impetus and momentum for integration of Ukraine within the European structures. But if you allow me, I will just limit myself to 3 points. First saying a few words about the bigger picture, as I hinted on, then outlining some of the challenges, and then finally ending with a few recommendations that we can be discussing further. So first, obviously, I already spoke about the context, and you already are all aware, but I think it's also very important to see how the European Union has approached this crisis, because obviously this has both been an enormous challenge for us in the European Union, and in particular in the Czech Republic, and for the Czech EU presidency and the previous French one, but also as a huge opportunity. And here I'm obviously referring to the June European Council, which has granted Ukraine the candidate status and opened up for the first time ever seriously doors into the European Union and future processes. And here with that, there's a number of challenges actually connected, beyond the war, because obviously here we need to be really thinking strategically, how to approach the country from our perspectives, how to fine-tune our policies, because obviously in the past, the primary tool of the European Union to deal with the Eastern European region has been the Eastern Partnership, as a policy concept, that has been designed for a completely different era, and here obviously we are facing much new challenges, and here we need to be also adjusting our approach. That is one of the tasks that is still lying ahead of the Czech EU presidency, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, for example, is about to publish a non-paper on the issue, how to fine-tune this one policy in particular. But obviously, there are much other dilemmas, connected to this. We have now Ukraine being part of the sort of future accession procedure that will basically bring new opportunities, for closer integration of Ukraine. And this is something that we really need to be putting in the forefront and in the center of our post-war reconstruction process, because there are two simultaneous tracks. One is the future integration of the country inside of the European Union, and the other one is obviously the reconstruction that we will be dedicating so much attention during the panel to. And finally, and I'm seeing that also as a potential opportunity, the recent Prague launch of the new initiative, European Political Community, is something that we could be seeing as another opportunity to bring European countries in favor of support of Ukraine, but also against the Russian aggression, and sort of seeing this as a tool, as an instrument to promote close integration of Ukraine inside of the European single market, but also the whole of European Union. So these are the bigger issues, that we are seeing on the EU level, the processes that are ahead of us, and on which the Czech EU presidency is still looking for some answers, and building consensus, among the member states. But more concretely, obviously we are here now discussing the processes of the immediate help, and I think colleagues from the People in Need, organization are best positioned to speak about the humanitarian crisis that we are seeing ahead of us, and which we will be dealing with for the next several months during the winter months, and we are preparing for the so-called process of interiorization, but also obviously in the coming years, depending on the future developments of the war. Then also, and this is something that we also need to be following very closely, and I think also Vlada will be discussing this very thoroughly, is the process of discussion on the side of the Western community, how to best support Ukraine, also for the post-war period, because obviously we have seen the previous steps, for example, the conference in the donor conference in Lugano. We have seen the recent conference in Berlin, with as we understood also from colleagues from the Czech Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in a much different atmosphere, much more pressing atmosphere, with the winter coming much closer, but also sort of our own financial possibilities, shrinking much further, than it was still during the summer. So here, obviously, new challenges, new sort of new tasks ahead of us, in building consensus among the EU member states, how to mobilize financial resources. These are some of the things that we will be really we will need to be dedicating a lot of attention in the future months. In the last couple of days, we have heard the commitments that the European Union is willing to provide, up to 18 billion euros over the next year. which goes to 1.5 billion for every month. But we now know that Ukraine is, because of, as a consequence of the war, in deficit every single month between 3.5 to 5 billion US dollars or European Union euros. So here, obviously, these challenges are really immense, and I think we need to be doing much more, and this is something that we are always trying to communicate, to the civil society, but also to the stakeholders on the side of the state, that obviously there are these pressing challenges here and now, and the European Union has not proved itself flexible enough, to mobilize the resources and to help the country with the immediate needs, because the state needs to keep running, it needs to pay out the salaries, it needs to invest in the arms deliveries, and to withstand the Russian pressure on the external, on the front line, but also to move on with the internal challenges, reform efforts, and the efforts that I referred to earlier as the accession process, which has been structured around several conditions, which are supposed to be met by the end of the year, and then open up the accession talks, either at the end of this year or early next year, as we are seeing. So here, obviously, this is one of the profound challenges that is still ahead of us, and I'm moving towards the second point already. A second dilemma, here obviously is lying ahead of us: how to coordinate this enormous process of post-war reconstruction. The European Union has rhetorically put itself in the center, and it's surrounding Ukraine. It is the first and primary partner of Ukraine, but at the same time, I spoke about the slowness, that we are seeing in mobilization of the financial resources, and not always, being able to deliver on different aspects of the post-war reconstruction and the immediate needs as well. So here, there are many question marks, lying ahead of us, and our own credibility is at stake, in fact, And then finally, and I'm already then offering a hint to what you will hear in the future interventions, obviously, how to put the principle of sustainability, in this kind of context, that people are suffering every day, that they are being bombarded by Russian rockets and everything like that. But then also, if we are in the place and capacity to think ahead and see how we are able to cope with this crisis, and how we are able to put these principles that are so dear for us in the European Union, but also for the future accession of Ukraine inside of the European Union, in the forefront of this process. I'm here hinting obviously on the principle of green sustainability, digital transition, and all of those processes that are still ahead of the country, facing these enormous challenges every day. So finally, I would like to give a couple of recommendations, and here the paper is quite exhaustive, I would say, in outlining the problems, lying ahead of the Czech EU presidency, but also how to overcome. I already spoke about the navigation on the European level, how to divide resources, where to focus our political attention. So this is something that we really need to be thinking very careful about, how to change our approach to Ukraine, how to best respond to its needs that are stemming from the Russian war, but also from our own expectations, because obviously when we are discussing about the future reconstruction of Ukraine and providing so many billions, of euros and dollars, for the future reconstruction, and there are different estimates between 350,000 up to 900 billion US dollars, that will need to be invested. Here obviously we will really need to be careful, how we fine-tune the process, how we make sure that these funds are distributed in a transparent way, that there is no space for corruption, and the checks and balances in between Brussels, Prague, and possibly, and then finally also Kiev will be evenly distributed, that the funds are efficient, but then also we need we have the mechanisms in place to make sure that this is not abused. So here obviously these are some of the challenges that are ahead of us, and we give recommendations how to overcome. And then finally, maybe if you allow me also a point driving back home to the Czech debate, because Czechia has been at the forefront of the debate, and I think there are some quite ambitious plans for the stabilization, but also providing humanitarian and development aid to Ukraine. And here we are calling on more flexibility on the side of the state. Here there are also colleagues from the Ministry of Industry and Trade, and we have discussed recently that we also need to be fine-tuning our own instruments that are supporting and stimulating the future investments from the business side, because we will not be able to overcome this crisis without the financial help and investment and the good work done by the business sector. So here obviously there's a number of instruments that we need to be focusing on, starting from the insurance that is at the forefront, basically making sure that the financial means are going flowing in the country, but also are secured enough, and the state is actually helping to stimulate this. So this is one of the concrete recommendations that we should be also discussing about. And then finally, and this is I will end on how to make sure to share the best practice from the Czech Republic, which is a country that itself went through a transition from common economy into a market-driven liberal economy. So this is something that we also need to be passing on and trying to provide some of the solutions and mechanisms and guidance for the future reconstruction of the country, with possibly also the Czech contribution along these lines. Thank you so much, and I will be very happy to answer questions and go further in the discussion.
Thank you very much, Pavel, for setting up basically the policy framework of our discussion. And well, I don't want to oversimplify because you mentioned a lot of points, but I think that one of the red lines was that actually we need to do more financially and also in terms of processes and structures. And actually, I'm looking at our next speaker, Ms. Hura from the Foreign Ministry, because at least we will be now interested to hear basically what are the plans, at least on the Czech level. But of course, if you can elaborate on some of the EU plans, as Pavel mentioned, we will be also happy to do that. But the floor is yours.
Hello. Yeah, is it working? Yeah. Thank you, thank you, Andrej, for introduction. Good morning, everyone. So let me continue the presentation with with introduction of main activities from the point of view of Ministry of Foreign Affairs in terms of humanitarian assistance, and also to introduce you some plans for reconstruction of the Ukraine. Currently, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is focusing on providing humanitarian assistance. In this year, in 2022, we already supported around 20 humanitarian assistance projects, either with cooperation with our implementing partners like People in Need, Caritas or Diaconia, or through colleagues from private sector companies. This year we were mostly focused on providing shelters, food and healthcare to internally displaced people in Ukraine and also to refugees in adjacent countries like Moldova. And right now we are preparing over 20 new projects that are focusing on winterization, preparation of Ukrainian people before coming winter. So these projects will be mainly focused on shelters, again, like we will provide some modular housing for the people. Then we will provide some sources of energy, like generators and also cogeneration units. And of course, we will focus again on on providing medical care to the people. As Andrej mentioned, in October, on the 12th of October, the program of humanitarian stabilization, reconstruction and economic assistance to Ukraine for the years 2023 to 2025 was agreed or approved by the government of the Czech Republic. The annual allocation is around 500 million Czech crowns, and this program is understood as a contribution of the Czech Republic to the reconstruction of Ukraine, which means to National Reconstruction Plan of Ukraine, and also to the reconstruction efforts of the European Union. So through this program, we can become also part of European efforts. I mentioned the annual allocation, which is 500 million Czech crowns, and this budget will be actually divided among several pillar ministries between Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Interior, then Ministry of Trade and Industry, of course, and the Ministry of Education and Health. Each ministry will then elaborate its own strategy, how to provide assistance to Ukraine, but also we expect that all the Czech ministries will become part of this program and will have an opportunity to engage and cooperate with the Ukrainian partners, because as Mr. Havlicek mentioned, once there will be time for recovery and for sharing know-how of public institutions. So we expect that the Czech ministries will be part of it and will share their know-how and expertise. The program, I can speak on behalf of the Development Cooperation Department and at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The program will be implemented through typical humanitarian and development instruments like grants to civil society organizations, grants to international organizations, local organizations in Ukraine and Moldova, and then of course through tools that are appropriate for colleagues from private sector companies like tied financial donations or tenders. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also I should mention something for the future plans. As I mentioned, the program will be valid from 2023. And right now we are providing mainly humanitarian assistance. So we expect that the current humanitarian assistance projects will continue and will be funded from the program. And continuously there will be more focus on stabilization, and as soon as the war ends, then we will provide development cooperation and reconstruction. So that's all.
Thank you very much for the input from basically the side of the state or of the government. And actually now we are moving to Marek Štis from People in Need. So I suppose that your input will be more from the view of a civil society organization that is active in Ukraine, and what actually challenges and what role you see you can play there. So Marek, please, the mic is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. I try my best. These are very complex issues, obviously, but let me please make few statements and words of warning at the beginning. We hear the when the war ends and so on. We will engage into stabilization and reconstruction efforts next year. This is all with a big question mark. What we are most probably facing is the war of attrition, which might drag on for years, maybe even for a decade, as we have seen in the past round of the conflict. And before we start, it's excellent that we are doing this planning and discussion, but before we start planning for real, we really have to have some sort of lasting solution. I'm not even speaking about the peace. There hasn't been peace in Eastern Ukraine for the past 8 years, and we won't likely have the peace next year. And the conflict can still be brought to completely different and very unpleasant level, as we see this sort of unprecedented attacks on the infrastructure at the moment. Let me remind you also that the conflict in Ukraine is the only conflict which is taking place in such a harsh climate as Ukraine, with the exception of Indian-Pakistani conflict, maybe on Siachen Glacier, but we are not discussing this in here. But we don't have any other country where we have such a vicious conflict in minus 20 degrees Celsius during the winter, which is bringing completely new set of challenges. And these actually, let's be very frank, let's speak about the war crimes, because these attacks on the civilian infrastructure, we don't have any other label than the war crimes, can bring the situation in Ukraine to something very unprecedented and very different than what we see at the moment. I'm not even mentioning the nuclear bottom and nuclear disasters and so on. Yeah, doesn't make big sense to discuss these scenarios. So we really have to see what happens. At this moment, we have a lot of humanitarian funding, maybe even more humanitarian funding than there are capacities to implement and address all these humanitarian needs. But what we need for the years to come is the flexibility of the funding. And we understand the division between the rigidity of the humanitarian development donors. We understand the reluctance of the development donors to come into the protracted crisis and to be a bit more risk averse than they are normally. But we really need a merger of these humanitarian reconstruction development instruments into some flexible set of funding. And what we hear actually from the Czech government, this is something which is relatively on a small scale, given the overall needs, but relatively nicely structured. And from what we understand, we can move and between the phases of the conflict and phases of the needs quite in a flexible and adaptive manner. So I would really like to appreciate it. I don't think we have the time to go through the description of all the current needs. We heard about the winterization, shelter repairs. We are speaking about the medium or light repairs, basically glassing the doors and windows, do very quick fixes of the roofs and so on. This is something very obvious for the winter. We are speaking about a lot of multi-purpose cash assistance. Basically, people are getting around $75 per month per person, which is allowing, particularly for the displaced people, to compensate a bit for the loss of income, to meet their basic needs and so on. But it's not enough. We speak about the situation of these roughly 7.5 or 7 million displaced people internally in Ukraine, which are partly residing in central but mostly in western Ukraine, in these safer parts of Ukraine, many of them living in very undignified conditions of these collective centers, which is a very tough situation. And donors tend to forget, as the gravity of the needs, as the donors label it, is always in the need, in the east, near the front lines. But the situation of these displaced people, and we are mostly speaking about the elderly people, people with disabilities, single mothers, etc. You know, this typical set of very, very vulnerable beneficiaries in the East. So this is very difficult. And the big thing, which is the protection, of course, the physical protection from the violence, from the attacks, the different protection needs, which is a big issue. But once and if we enter into this hopefully more stable and predictable phase, might happen next year, or at least if the situation in the spring remains as it is right now, we have to really agree on the principles of the reconstruction, because we have seen in many post-conflict, post-disaster settings a failure of the reconstruction rather than really good reconstructions. There are few principles that we can derive from the experience of the past 8 years, particularly in eastern Ukraine, where we have exactly seen the failures of the reconstruction, lack of the attention of the donors. We all took the situation like for granted, that there's the line in the east, it will last. It has not, of course. It was just a frozen conflict, and it unfroze very suddenly. We have seen that the no basically lasting solutions for the displaced people, for their housing, for their income, etc., etc. We have seen the country being divided and economically crippled in the east. So all these negative aspects, we haven't seen any good lessons. So we really have to look carefully back what was not working and how to make it better this time. What we would like to recommend for this stabilization reconstruction phase is at first to look at the localized solutions. Yeah, a top-down, centrally managed reconstruction is not a good recipe, and we understand how a energetic and enlightened mayor of a small city can really make a difference during the reconstruction. This actually is something about the good government, about the community participation, about the bottom-up approach rather than top-down approach, about the engagement of the civil society, communication of the municipalities and administration with their citizens, with the population, and really use this crisis as an opportunity actually to build back better and to improve. one important thing is that we must not be afraid to invest into it. Yeah, we might hear, okay, let's rebuild Ukraine to the pre-invasion situation. I think this is a nonsense. This is an opportunity to build better, invest into betterment, improvements, and basically tackle all these aspects of improvement which we have had in here so far. I have also already tackled in the last panel the issue of the resilience. Can we really build up the resilience of the Ukraine, of the inhabitants against the new conflicts? Probably not. Against the energetic sustainability, probably yes. You know, so we really have to think through what do we mean by building up the resilience. This is I think very interesting and important. But in the process, we can incorporate a lot of considerations. We can think about the environmental consideration and renewable energies. Definitely, we can engage in a good urban planning and improve the Ukrainian cities. We can look into, and Ukraine would have to look into, the issues of the social cohesion and community level peace building, particularly in those occupied and deoccupied areas where many nasty things happened, a lot of collaboration happened. There would be super high tensions, and we have to be, or Ukrainian government has to be very attentive to these issues, which might absolutely disrupt all these reconstruction processes in these places if those places are permanently deoccupied. I think we have seen a lot of negative examples about temporary solutions. Yeah, let's do a quick fixes in here, and then we do it properly. Yeah, it doesn't work like this usually. Yeah, the quick fixes become very often permanent solutions. Yeah, so it's probably rather better to invest immediately into proper solutions. For this, of course, we need this lasting solution, lasting peace, etc., which might be quite tricky. But really, let's avoid these temporary ones, which tend to become permanent. And I think I would stop in here, maybe to say last thing that in this reconstruction we really have to be very contextual, because we are looking at very different context. We are looking at the context of the cities in, let's say, Lugansk Oblast, like Severodonetsk and Lysychansk and Bakhmut, which have been completely smashed, completely destroyed to the ground. We have seen these shocking drone images. So how do you reconstruct such a city? You have to rebuild it from the scratch. We are looking at the partly damaged communities in these liberated areas. I was in Bakhmut, in Balaklia recently, and near Izium, where you see, half city destroyed, some villages completely smashed, some partly standing. So this is a different context. Then you have the set of the massive needs, which are not about the infrastructure, but about the people, and this is about the displaced people, and many of them, hundreds of thousands, if not millions, will become permanently displaced. So again, new housing arrangements, new income generation, basically making sure that their livelihoods are and their independence on humanitarian aid is in place. And I already mentioned this very tense and very difficult situation in some of these deoccupied, liberated communities, which might be a really hard nut to crack, and it's a lot of attention to come up with some sustainable solutions. Thank you, and we can discuss later.
Thank you very much, Marek, for providing actually insight of what the situation is, and also coming up with a very concrete recommendation and needs which could help the different actors on the ground to help the people there. And now, actually, we will complete almost the picture with a view from the business community, the Czech business community. So please, Madam Kuchtová, the mic is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me to this interesting event and panel. I'm representing here the private sector, and our view is I think quite clear. Among our members, there are many who are interested to be involved in the process of reconstruction of Ukraine. But I agree totally with the big question mark about next year, because of course business is looking for safe solutions, and those companies who are really interested to be a part of the process for sure will wait for some signal. Now it's safe, at least in some parts of Ukraine. Let's do it. The other thing is that with the current situation, with the extremely high prices of energy and gas, especially we in Czech Republic have a really big problem as industry with that from various reasons. Many companies, according to the information we have, are postponing some investment, let's say in technologies or some new equipment. So it's a question if they will be able to invest their own resources to some kind of cooperation with their partners in Ukraine. But still, the interest is there. Of course, we have identified the main areas. I think it's clear. It's be it energy or heating for the coming winter, some boilers, be it environmental technologies, decontamination, waste and water treatment, all these things where we have very strong and competitive companies. Then, of course, agriculture or engineering and for sure reconstruction of some industrial plants, those who were destroyed or somehow do not work. So these are all aspects and areas where we would like very much to be involved. And I would appreciate very much if there is a kind of platform for civil society, business, NGOs. I think people in need have absolutely excellent experience and information from the battlefield, government, European Union. So we would very much like to have a platform where we would be able to find a way, because, for instance, we don't have capacity as Confederation joining industrial manufacturing companies, how to find a way. We have a partner in Ukraine, now even in connection with Association of Ukraine to European Union. We are now discussing in Business Europe, which is the umbrella organization in Brussels, which of those Ukrainian organizations, because there are several, would be, if I may say so, the best choice to be associated member for Business Europe. So we have their partners, but they are also in very difficult situation, and we have been cooperating in the areas of humanitarian supplies for some items they have asked us to provide, but that's it. And we would like to have a kind of debate and pointing some ways how to matchmake, because this is what we can do. Matchmaking, networking, it's one of our main activities. So if there is such a platform in Czech Republic, we would very much be part of it. And when the situation hopefully someday will be better, we will be happy to join. I would like to mention also the business club, which was one of the points of the program. Even it's a project of Ministry of Industry and Trade. We are just one part of. So my colleagues are taking part in the sessions, and there was a joint delegation organized in the end of September to Lvov, which is of course so far safe. So there were, I think, about 30 companies taking part, and we will be happy to continue. Of course, there is a question if Lvov is the right place to find the partners and possibilities. As far as I know, there are some discussions about using some industrial plants or space for business in that part for some Czech companies that would like to use this opportunity, let's say, to relocate their production there. So why not? But this is not the main focus, of course. We would like to to be involved in the reconstruction. And as I was informed by my colleague, this business club Ukraine is preparing also some other meetings. There will be some discussion next week with some delegation from Ukraine, and there will be also organized participation for Czech companies on the trade fair that will take part in February in Poland, which is very active also in everything connecting some aid for Ukraine. So we will of course support all these things, but as I mentioned, some kind of platform where we could join forces would be very much welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you also for bringing up the question of coordination, you know, and platform of basically joining the ideas and experience of different actors. I'm pretty sure that we will get to this also in the discussion. But now we are getting to Vlada, to our last but not least speaker, and basically we are now getting to the area of environmental sustainability and basically modernization of Ukraine. So please, Vlada, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you, all of you, and to the panelists for and for the organizers to have the whole panel about Ukraine. And we've been hearing about the war which is happening in Ukraine and the consequences for practically worldwide throughout these 2 days. So it is inevitable that we have to discuss this in depth. And of course, I'm very pleased to see experts who are knowing so much in depth the issues on the ground and the willingness to get involved. This is really inspiring, and I'm sure all the people of Ukraine are really thankful for the solidarity and all the support which was done to the country throughout these 9 months of the war since February. I'm here in the capacity of the international network of NGOs, which is called Bankwatch, but also representing the national member in Ukraine, which is called Center for Environmental Initiatives, EcoAction. And this is where we are getting more in-depth understanding what is needed for the country. In our work as a network, we are constantly relying on the communities and local organizations and the solutions which they are proposing, and then coming to the international setup, we advocate for them. And this is why we are now working on the reconstruction level and following the international processes around this. And we've been discussing the development finance. This is not the focus which Bankwatch is usually focusing on, but throughout the discussions, and of course, there is understanding that we would need to focus on that in certain ways as well, exactly because of the reconstruction which the humanitarian aid would be playing a role in the whether it will be something temporary or not temporary. In Ukraine, we say that there is nothing more constant than temporary, so we have to make it sustainable. Yeah, I'll try to. Yeah, here is the picture of the current situation in Kiev. Probably you've seen in the news that there were recently a lot of attacks on the energy infrastructure in Ukraine, and at least every day the 10 regions out of 24 in Ukraine are having blackouts, and people are having like 5-6 hours of electricity and have to have one appliance connected to the grid at once. So there is even like official recommendations for that. And yeah, this is the situation in Kiev, totally darkness and only the cars on the streets. Some more pictures of the destructions just to have the scale what we are discussing. This is from Irpin from spring and more. Yeah. I don't know why. it shows. So now I'll tell that what we've been doing so far. As the civil society, we immediately understood that the root cause of all the possibility for the aggressor to come and for the war to happen in Ukraine was related to the capacities of the Russia to sell its fossil fuels. And here we are seeing who are the main importers and who were supplying and fueling, so to say, the war. Here, it was done by our partners, international partners, and jointly with EcoAction. And here we are also seeing what are the priorities of the countries. Russia is exporting fossil fuels, and Ukraine is exporting food. This is, I think it says for itself who is doing what and why. Also, another direction which we had to focus since the war has started as environmentalists is that we started helping the Ministry of Environment and now in parallel to compare the results, we have started tracking the damages to the environment. And so that eventually there would be the possibility in some time to get the compensations and the remediation for them. However, this is all what we are doing for the victory, and we understand that we have to look into the future, and the future would be about the post-war reconstruction, which one may say that it has started in certain regions where the Russian troops has retreated or were forced to leave, and this is the northern parts, and some parts already now in the east and in the south. So there is critical needs, and practically the municipalities are struggling to sustain the livelihoods for the people. So there it started, and that's why even the government in spring started thinking about the plans for the reconstruction. And there is common understanding that there should be a vision where we want to be, and for sure somewhere in a better situation. And we are calling this rebuild back, not back, but better Ukraine. So that we would not waste the momentum and not to compromise the sacrifices of the Ukrainian people, which they're going through now. And of course, we are thinking about the attracting back the displaced people who had to flee, to revive the natural environment and to economy overall. And this is the challenge for sure. One of the hooks or the anchors, as it's often called, is the and aspiration for us is the granted candidacy to the European Union, and we would like to see and to use the pathway which was already started within the association, so that the reconstruction planning will be and reconstruction overall would be done in a compliance with the EU policies and procedures. The government has started the planning in since April, and invited the CSOs to participate in that process overall. The first plans were presented in Lugano in Switzerland in July. However, it was very much rough plans. I'm not sure if everyone knows about it, but we've been since then still participating in the working groups. There were 23 working groups, putting extensive process, but still the plan is up to us quite scattered, and doesn't have the priorities which we would like to see there. For example, there can be something sustainable and unsustainable, like contradicting each other in energy sector and practically in every sector. Thus, we as the civil society have come together and particularly working on the green issues and on the environmental issues, and came up with the green reconstruction principles and overall concept, so that the reconstruction would be, for Ukraine, would be something innovative and based on the decarbonized economy. The sustainability is key so that the fossil fuel dependency would not be an issue anymore, and there would be new technologies and renewable energy in lead. Yeah, coming again, I cannot, talking about the reconstruction planning overall, I cannot leave aside the notion that it would not be an cheap exercise. Yeah, I forgot to show the map where the retreats and everything happened. It would not be, it will be pretty expensive. For now, as of June, the needs and damage assessment of the World Bank jointly with the DG NIR and Ukrainian government produced the first report on needs and damages, saying that reconstruction in Ukraine would be costing 349 billion euro. And for the each next year, practically we would need around 80 billion to start the reconstruction. And this is huge money, and we understand and that the donor coordination and donor platform would be needed to kind of have an umbrella over it. And we know that even donors are saying now that if the platform would be there, they would be willing to join, and definitely there will be all kinds of donors, countries, member states, G7, G20, everyone, even private and other banks, they would be invited. But what we're seeing is that since the announcement of the platform by the European Commission in May, nothing happened overall until now. There was announcement and promises that in Berlin on 25th of October, the donors would come up with some proposals for the platform, for its establishments and structure, but unfortunately it didn't happen, and the solutions are still postponed, even though we feel that it should be started now. It will take a while to establish and to institutionalize this, and we cannot postpone it overall. And of course, the planning. The government of Ukraine is pretty much now torn into the solving critical issues, and to concentrate on the planning is hard to expect something like really expert or anything. So we really are asking the international community and the governments to assist with the planning, because there is an expertise in the European Union and internationally, and this would be really beneficial for, especially in terms of the planning instruments. I will move. Here I wanted to show the differences. It is the map of the Ukrainian regions, and we are seeing that they will be, even now they are determined to be divided into the 4 regions, depending on the functions that they will be holding. The western parts were not very much damaged, that's why they are here in yellow, and the others are kind of the liberated and the supportive regions to to the and closer to the front line. And here, this map shows that there will be upcoming reconstruction planning processes for all the regions, and the municipalities and overall the local governments would need to come up with their local reconstruction plans and up to the Ministry of Regional Development to be adopted. Here we see that it would be a certain process that has to feed in somehow to the national reconstruction plan, but for now there is a discrepancy and no connection. So somehow this should be connected so that the really bottom-up planning would feed into that plan nationally. Again, I'm coming back to the proposals of the environmental NGOs from Ukraine. They come up with the green principles. It was more than 50 NGOs, and still the signatories are being added. And we defined the Ukraine's green reconstruction as the sustainable reconstruction realized using the best technologies and practices. With such, it's relevant for all the sectors, and we feel that the needs of Ukrainians should be promoted, the environmental standards should be held, the communities should be involved, there should be green economy, effective funds use, and of course the effective planning tools. Yes, so this is relevant for all the sectors, but I will be concentrating today on the agriculture, which is the sector that Ukraine is known for, and it was always important for our country, and it will be playing an important role overall in the future as well. And unfortunately, since the war has started, it has become the target of the aggression and also the weapon of the aggressor. The agricultural sector pre-war has brought to the country around 10% of the GDP and sustained the 40% of its exports. So you can understand how much, what is the dimension we are talking about and the importance for the country. So as of now, there is 30% of the land which is not accessible or dangerous to be used for the farming in the country. It will take around from 5 to 10 years to demine the lands. And in monetary evaluation, the sector has suffered at least $4 billion direct losses and 23 billion indirect losses as of summer. There were destroyed and disrupted logistic chains due to mostly the blockades of the ports and annexation of those routes, and stealings of the grains and overall the destruction of the farmers on the occupied regions. It is expected that this year there will be the harvest loss in grain expected to reach 40%. And in corn, where Ukraine is one of the leaders in the world, it will be decreasing 25%. The war has made it clear that the food production and distribution, as it has worked until now, should be adapted and revised, nationally as well as internationally. And there were not very favorable conditions in Ukraine. Practically, orientation for the exports didn't bring really sustainability and overall good effects for the local communities and rural development. Over the last decades in Ukraine, we've seen the development and the huge rise of the agro holdings, who occupied the niche of the main exporters, and practically we've been observing and reporting the land grabs, the nature resources grabs, and so on. While the 80% of the rural population stayed in the informal, non-registered sector, and while they were supplying around 50% of the labor-intensive production. So you can understand as well the dimension. Even more, the smaller farmers have shown how the huge resistance over the war times. They practically helped a lot during the occupations in those regions and overall, because while the big ones were reliant on the transportation routes, on the storages and everything, the smaller ones were distributed and they were very much resilient. So immediately they have shown that this is a sustainable way, and this is how the agricultural sectors should be developing. Local focus on the local food systems is important. Support for the small and medium-sized. Rural development, so that the people would be attracted back to the rural areas, and the livelihood there would be not worse compared to the megapolises. And sustainable solutions, circular economy and nature-based solutions is what we are also proposing within our green reconstruction proposals. There is also the issue of the land market, in Ukraine, which was under moratorium for the land sales, agricultural use, and only opened in last year. It has been frozen for a while this year since the war has started, but already working now. There is a possibility to purchase the agricultural land, but only from the individuals. The companies cannot buy them for now, but it will be opened for the companies in 2024. And there is also certain concerns for us, because due to considerations, if the smaller farmers would be having the resources to purchase the land, and then to conduct their activities. Yes, and also how to solve the issue of the 30% contamination and destruction by the war. We have started thinking about this, and one of the solutions can be that those lands can be changed and conserved, so that the nature eventually would, it will be too expensive to clean up and to do everything there. And for now, we are seeing that as the opportunity to convert those lands into, and practically to conserve them within the communities, so that they would be stayed intact and the naturally decontaminated, while we will be monitoring the pollution, what's going on there, and so on. And maybe in a ways that would be also helping to increase the nature conservation percentage, which we are also entitled to increase up to 30% within the EU processes and policies. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lada, for your input, and I feel, and for really detailed input in the sector of agriculture, but also I feel that we started with the sort of like global international community EU angle, and we also end up at basically underlying the need of really cooperation and help and support of the reconstruction plans in Ukraine that needs to come also from the international community. And since we are approaching the time given to our panel, I would like to suggest that maybe, if you agree, we would open now the floor for the question from the audience. And please, if you have any comments or questions also to your fellow panelists, if you can then include it, for example, in your answers or comments, for the comments. So now I open the floor for anyone from the audience who would like to ask a question or comment on what was said? David, in the first row.
Hi, okay, works. Hi, David Ondračka. I used to be head of TI before Ondřej, but now I work with, among other things, with NEON, which is network of networks of NGOs that is looking at the policy answers towards Czech government on different areas. But one of them is this post-crisis reaction to Ukraine and to this fascinating inflow of migrants to the Czech Republic, and how the Czech government is able to cope with that structurally so that it doesn't create some backlash against Ukraine. Because we've seen an amazing wave of solidarity on one hand, but it evaporates logically on one hand. And if government is not able to create structurally favorable conditions to next waves, then most probably it will be politically unattainable, unforeseeable actually to expect more money to be invested into reconstruction and stuff. And I believe it's not enough simply that Prime Minister takes nice pictures in Kiev, because it needs to be translated into very specific steps towards housing, education, healthcare, relocations of migrants within our regions, which is not happening at the moment much. And so my question is like whether this is a Czech-specific issue, whether this kind of, or they dealing with the same thing in Poland or other countries that accept Ukrainian migrants, and whether they are more ready for next waves of migrants that will be coming because of winter and other stuff. And the second comment, that's about reconstruction. I know it's too. As Marek said, the war is probably going to last a long time, and we expect a very protracted conflict. But there is some reconstruction happening already in some areas, especially when you look at the energy sector, and there must be some rapid things. So I would wonder what is your comment on that, and how can it be done when the war is still on and it is still open. And very last comment, I used to go to Ukraine within my work, and honestly, what I saw in terms of corruption, that was fascinating. That was just beyond anything that I've seen globally, the level of oligarchization, kleptocracy, and corruption. So when I hear we want to invite Ukraine to EU, I very much support it geopolitically. But we need to address that issue as well, because otherwise, especially when the inflow of reconstruction money, it's going to be a disaster. So that's what I would just want to stress from what I've seen a few years ago. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you for all the questions. Who would like to start? Pavel, please.
Maybe just briefly, thank you so much, David, for the question. Actually, on the comparison, it's quite interesting, because just yesterday we were discussing exactly this, and we had a perspective from Germany and Baden-Württemberg, one of the Bundesland, of the same size that Czechia is, around 10 million. It has taken the highest percentage of inflow of people since 1940s, let's say, and it's by comparison 4 times less than in the Czech Republic. So you could see that Czechia has really per capita overplayed most of the actors, not in absolute numbers. You referred to Poland, obviously here the situation is much bigger, and that has been traditionally the case. Already before the new start of the war, there was a substantial Ukrainian community proportionately, and this has increased, but obviously there are much similar issues, with integration into the system economically, but also education-wise. But for example, since I think several months ago, Poland has already severely limited, the inflow of new people, and this is the bigger problem, because the countries such as the Czech Republic or Poland, they already reached up to their capacity, and there was this kind of idea yesterday flowing around that we should be much more open and look for European solutions in terms of, like, for example, housing of people and providing shelter, but also in terms of sort of integration in educational policies. Because, for example, by countries such as France and others in the further to west, much less has been done than in the countries that are naturally exposed to this influence. And one of the comparisons that was quite interesting was that in Germany, this decision was made that the Ukrainian refugees are eligible for all social benefits, and for young family this means 1,400 euros a month, whereas in France that means 500 euros a month. So substantial difference, and that is why you would have so much more refugees in Germany than in France for obvious reasons, not only geographically. So here we need to be looking for European solutions into this. And if you allow me one more comment on this future integration, I think you are pointing the finger at the right place in terms of the de-oligarchization and fight against corruption. This has been also something that I try to refer to. It is also part of the 8 conditions that Ukraine was given in June to follow on, reforms of judiciary, anti-corruption fight and all that. This is still an ongoing struggle at the second front that Ukraine is now fighting, has been since 2014, and I think we need to be, yes, we need to be in terms of the future integration visionary and ambitious, but at the same time very vigilant when it comes to implementation of these conditions, but also future steps, and the whole sort of process is still at the very beginning, and there will be a long way forward. But here obviously is also a place for Czechia with your work, you know, with your previous work, to share the experience, and we have seen many of it, you know, earlier, not maybe to this extent, but a lot, you know, and just issues of clash of interests and things. These are common words right here. So this is just much bigger scale in Ukraine, and I think we are here to help from the civil society angle. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else from the panel would like to react to these questions? And I would also maybe remind that the third one, which was actually on what can be done regarding modernization already while the war is still going on, and what is your comment on the processes that are already taking place? Thanks.
I would also react on the corruption issue. Is that when we're talking to the donors, currently we are telling them that there should be transparency and accountability attached to any transfers which is done in the country. So as simple as it is, finally, I've been hearing in Brussels the talks that there will be demands attached to the transfers related to at least the disclosure of the final beneficiaries. I mean, since the war started, I'm getting the responses from the financial institutions that they are feeling uneasy to demand from the government the certain reportings. However, there is understanding that if there any corruption, big or small, any scale, and now we are having already currently running one with the major figure coming from the National Bank, there is understanding that the disclosures and those demands would be attached. So I'm not sure about it.
Thank you. Marek?
About these ongoing efforts, I wouldn't call them reconstruction. These are mostly quick fixes to keep the country running if it comes, for example, to the energy grid. And I think we'll definitely have an issue about this funding for reconstruction being released in the situation of active conflict, even if the conflict, as we've seen on this division of the regions of Ukraine, is definitely not impacting so much the Western Ukraine, Central Ukraine, and so on. But the availability of funding for reconstruction would not be there. And again, like these attacks on the energy grid can bring up completely different set of the needs for the future reconstruction. I was very much impressed what you said, Vada, about all these plans, about the greening aspects of reconstruction, which is exactly the way as we as NGOs feel about this the reconstruction. I think you nailed a lot of these things very nicely. And I just wanted to have a brief comment to what Mrs. Kuchtova was mentioning about the engagement of the Czech businesses into the reconstruction. We have heard a lot, and we really believe in the sustainability of the locally led the reconstruction. And I think in the same way as the NGOs are finding their national local counterparts, like my organization has up to now about 180 local partners. So our work is to very large extent based on the collaboration with local partners. I think the same principle should apply to any business entities and companies dealing with Ukraine, basically finding their local counterparts. And we would definitely like to see the transfer of the technologies, transfer of the capacities, innovation, technological solutions, rather than seeing, as we saw it in the past, that the Czech aid to Ukraine would sort of degenerate into the pro-export tool, which would be absolutely unsustainable and wrong, I would say. But I think there are these capacities in Czech Republic and other European countries, and this is exactly the way how the Ukraine could be reconstructed better with all these environmental friendly and green and decarbonization aspects.
Thank you. If there are no more reactions from the panel, I will again ask the audience for their question. In this third row.
Maybe just a question for the panel. We've seen in other major crises such as Syria that there is initially a very strong political will to support, to engage, and we've had exactly the same thing, if not more so, in Ukraine over the last couple of years. However, with the Americans pretty much announcing if they take the Senate, then there's no longer going to be a blank check for Ukraine. We'll see the economic fallout of COVID hitting economies. We're seeing general depression and recession in many of the European countries. And the demands that you're talking about at the moment are absolutely ridiculous. How do you expect to keep this kind of focus and this donor engagement in the long term, because we are talking about decades of work ahead? And EU really just doesn't work on those kind of timeframes in terms of their own political mechanisms. We see a lot more popularism. We see some shakiness in some of the EU member states already. What do you think can be done to ensure that these kind of nice commitments at the moment really are actually going to turn into a reality on the ground, and not, as Marek says, just a set of small quick fixes that will just stay like that forever?
Thank you. Very easy question. Marek would like to go first.
No, I think it's a very easy question actually, and the answer is to keep the public support up and avoid exactly what David pointed out to, this sort of unwise or unthoughtful steps of the government, or disinterest of the government, which is, our government is very good at, proclamatory level. But when you look at how they are dealing with the integration of Ukrainians in Czech Republic, they are really malfunctioning at this moment. So avoiding this would help to keep the support at least up to some sufficient level, so that the politicians have the mandate from their electorate to keep the funding flowing. And I think this is the trick. But unless we see that these poorly thought through the integrational support of the Ukrainians in Czech Republic will create this backlash against Ukrainians and Ukraine Ukraine question in general, then there will not be public support, there will be no governmental funding, and all these concepts would basically fail. So I think the question starts at home.
Thank you. Pavel?
Thank you. Just maybe very briefly on this funding question. You're absolutely right. The needs are immense, and that's why we are always trying to remind in these discussions, and also to in discussion with international stakeholders, that there is also another way, and this is related to the frozen assets that we have frozen to the Russian central bank. These are just on its own 300 billion either US dollars or euros. It's combined in different countries, in the United States, but also in Germany and elsewhere. So this could be constituting a huge portion, big proportion of the financial assistance that Ukraine will need. This should be also sort of based on the very strong justice mechanism, be the price that Russia pays for that, This is excluding all the other assets, that are more sort of, difficult to tackle from our value perspective when it comes to the yachts and hotels and all that, the luxury products that we have frozen as well, but are sensitive because that's private property. But this is belonging directly to the Russian state aggressor that, for example, both chambers now of the Czech parliament designated as a terrorist country, right? So here, obviously, this is the big debate, that is still ahead of us. But I think this is one of the tasks ahead of the Czech EU presidency to promote discussion about this. Because so far, what we have seen would be these modest contributions, 1.5 billion, every month for next year. If you combine 27 countries, it's not crazy. It's something, but if you plan ahead and these pledges were made in Berlin, this seems quite all right. United States would be adding similar pile, and at least on the basics, this could be the sum of money that could be going to Ukraine next year from both of the parties. But here, obviously, the the challenge is much bigger than that. And maybe if I can go back also to this popularity and sustainability of the support for Ukraine element, I think what really we need to be also focusing on is the domestic integration. And I'm going back to the point of David. One thing that I was also specifically told by colleague to remind of is that there is quite a lot of expertise in place. For example, our own Association for International Affairs has been involved in educational projects for the last 15 years in Ukraine, bringing knowledge from Czechia to Ukraine, but also the other way around. So it's a two-way street now, and so much of this expertise is now being used back in the Czech Republic thanks to the Czech aid, also to integrate the pupils, the young people, in the educational sphere, but also promote this kind of sort of a flow of ideas. I heard somewhere that up to 40% of university students are now outside of Ukraine. This is a huge potential. It's also a big threat to Ukraine for the sake of brain drain in future. But we need to be working with this. We need to be working on this with the human capital and also on these soft aspects of the reconstruction. Because when you, Marek, referred to what we can be doing, probably not really, as you said, preventing the future war, but what we can be doing is really to increase the resilience on this community level that you referred to. Wherever I think, it's both the decentralization reform, one of the most efficient and the best working, in over the last couple of years since 2014 Ukraine, but it's also the work with the human capital, which should be part of our thinking when it comes to the soft reconstruction of the country.
Thank you, Pavel and Mrs. Kuchtova.
Thank you. You are absolutely right. There are many nice commitments. And of course, regarding Europe, Europe must first solve the impacts of the wrong decisions in the past, which was, for instance, dependence on Russian gas, and that caused this terrible financing of the war for Putin. So this is very important. Fortunately, as far as I know, now Czech Republic has no Russian gas anymore. It should be Norway and LNG coming from through Germany. So that's a good point. But of course, it brings many problems, and we can see there is no more any level playing field in the energy sector in Europe, because many countries naturally have taken their own national decisions how to help their industry and so on. So we have to follow that, and there are plans on the table. So we have to follow these commitments and try to manage both problems.
Thank you, Vlada. Oh, yeah. Okay.
I just maybe a question to to Ms. Lucia, that came to my mind. If you happen to know what is going on and how the coordination currently works within the European institutions.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, I think this is a question maybe for my colleagues from CZ presidency, not for development cooperation, I mean bilateral development cooperation. However, I must say I don't have any actual update on this, to be honest. but I just wanted to react on the question. Actually, we all know that the reconstruction of Ukraine will be quite a long-term process, and when you see the national plan for reconstruction of Ukraine, they also formulated this plan until the year 2033. So they know very well it will take some time. We know it as well, and we will work on mobilizing the funding. Also, Mr. Havlicek mentioned human capital. This will be definitely also part of the support provided by the Czech Republic, because we will provide governmental scholarships to Ukrainian students. So we increased the number of the scholarships, so we really want to use this human capital as well.
Thank you. I'm afraid. Okay, we have time for very last question, and since it's Pavel, I think I need to really give him the floor.
My question also, or kind of the comment is also that there was this plea from Mrs. Kuchtova that we have some maybe more communication platform about how to clarify what's necessary in Ukraine, that NGOs have certain knowledge, business has certain knowledge, and there is nothing in place at the moment. So I take it as something, as a food for thought for us to try to figure out how we could this communication, how to set it up, let's say, in less random way than it is going on now. But my point actually about the reconstruction is also that it's my understanding that also a lot of structures of a civil society in Ukraine, for example, fell apart because of the war, and many people are living abroad and so on. So also when planning the reconstruction, I think there is strong need also for some soft measures like a capacity building for local society to actually figure out and to coordinate among itself and to agree on some certain priorities that also could be promoted to the decision makers in some, let's say, participatory debating manner, so that it's not like isolated inputs from here and there because somebody is able to be actively involved, another one in Ivano-Frankivsk, but there is nothing based on the common ground. So I think also the reconstruction efforts should also focus on capacity building of civil society there.
Thank you for the comment. Maybe just a quick reaction, maybe on the national level, if you can think of, or if, for example, there are some plans for having some coordination, a platform that would actually put together actors from the government, from CSOs, from business. If there is already something in mind or you have heard of, maybe it would be good to share it now. Yeah, I see Pavel.
Thank you so much, Andrei. Maybe just one idea that we have started with recently is following this green aspect that Vlada dedicated her speech to. So we will be looking into, from the association's point of view, into the post-war reconstruction, the long-term, not the fast one that Marek, for example, spoke about, the humanitarian one, but the longer one in terms of setting the agenda, discussing the principles, coordination and all that. So we will be trying to bring parties together through the recently launched project that we have got supported thanks to the kind support of the European Climate Foundation. So this will be one of the efforts, and we had just had the first meeting, which got together a couple of actors also sitting in the room, and there was this kind of need for coordination. We will be trying to contribute from the civil society point of view, but I think there is definitely space for more robust process. We are planning several meetings on this topic in the future. The next discussion will be happening on the 6th of December as part of a bigger event, part of the Eastern Partnership Civil Society Forum. So we will be committed to this topic for the foreseeable future, and we'll be very happy to gather parties around the table. We already had colleagues from People in Need and elsewhere. So here, yeah, we will be working on this for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I would like to add that on the governmental level, we already have coordination platform that put together different ministries. It's called Working Group Ukraine, and it's under the Council for Development Cooperation. And it's a kind of coordination platform where also representatives of force are joining, and also representatives from the Ministry of Industry and Trade and from the private sector.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry if there's there is no more time for more questions, but I invite you that you actually find your panelist and follow up maybe during the lunch. It's very difficult actually to wrap up this panel because a lot of really interesting points and recommendations were said, but maybe the main which I would like to recall is what Marek just said at the beginning, that actually, and many of you also repeated, that actually the task of reconstruction of Ukraine is not for a year, it's for decades, and that's maybe one of the most challenging things at this moment, to basically keep the attention, keep the promises, keep the control of those who made the promises, that actually the process will continue and will not end up in somewhere in the fog in the future. Of course, it's a very complex issue, and I guess that the process and the structure, how actually how to coordinate all the different expertise and needs, how to do it openly, how to do it transparently is another big challenging moment. And definitely there is something more that need to be done still on the Czech level, as we heard that there are starting the initiatives that actually help with the coordination, but probably this will need to be developed further, and let alone the EU and the further international community. And maybe the last point is that actually we should not forget about our home front, so to speak, that we have also many people who came from Ukraine, hundreds of thousands, and that are currently living there. They have their needs, and we should not forget about them and keep helping them. So these were, at least from my side, a few points that I take from the discussion, but there, as I said, there were many more. So I would like to thank to my panelists, to Mrs. Kuchtova, thank you very much, to Pavel Havlíček, to Vladana Martinkiewicz, to Marek Štys, and to Lucia Chuda. Thank you very much. Thank you also for your attention, for your questions. And I guess that before we go for lunch, there is still some announcement from Pavel. So now it's...
Very brief announcement. The lunch break takes place here in the bar, basically, so you don't need to go anywhere outside and coming back afterwards. And from 2 p.m. there are 2 workshops. One workshop on innovation and development in relation to food security, which takes place in this room. And the second workshop on Concord Aid Watch 2022 report, which will take place in that corner at the right side from the bar. We will put some more chairs there so that are comfortable. So both workshops start at 2 and they will last for something like 90 minutes.